Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast, exploring the inner reaches of the heart and mind. Brought to you by Germany-Austria, Germany-Austria, and your host, Erric Solomon.
Today on the Kind Heartfulness podcast, we have a special guest, Elizabeth Mattis Namgyel, who'll be joining us. She's a Buddhist author, a teacher, a perpetual student, and a contemporary voice for Buddha's wisdom. I've known Elizabeth for quite a number of years now, and it's just been so inspiring to watch how this woman has blossomed into such a powerful and important teacher. In fact, she studied the Buddha Dharma for over 35 years under the guidance of her root teacher, Zigor Kongtrul Rinpoche, and she's the author of two marvelous books, The Power of an Open Question and The Logic of Faith. And she also was the editor on two books by Kongtrul Rinpoche, It's Up to You and Light Comes Through. She teaches all over the world and is a resident teacher at Mangala Shri Bhuti. She completed a 6-year retreat, and afterwards, Kongtrul Rinpoche appointed her retreat master at the Samye Ling Retreat Center in Colorado. And as if that's not enough, she holds a BA in anthropology and a master's in Buddhist studies. Now, Elizabeth focuses on Buddha's middle way, teachings on interdependence and emptiness. She's really quite impressive in the way that she can bring modern contemporary language and way of approaching these middle way teachings and make the view come alive as living experience for people who are fortunate enough to attend one of her seminars and retreats. And so today, what we thought would be fun, Elizabeth and I, is rather than talk exactly about the view, we'd like to talk about the F word. And F word here is faith. Faith is something that comes up a lot, especially in Vajrayana Buddhism, but in all the different schools of Buddhism. And I think it's usually quite misunderstood. And also, I have to say, I'm a little bit nervous because as soon as you hear the word faith, I think some of you are already switching over to some other podcast. But I promise you that this is going to be a lot of fun and maybe even open up some ways of approaching this tricky subject that you hadn't thought of. And of course, we'll tie it to the view. So please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Mattis Namgyel to the Kind Heartfulness podcast.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you, Elizabeth. And today we're going to talk about the F word.
Okay. One of my favorite topics.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear about that. You wrote a book about it, in fact. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the F word is?
Yeah, the F word is faith. And I wrote a book called The Logic of Faith. Actually, I forget the subtitle. I have it right here just in case. You know, when you write a book, you don't look at it for a long time afterwards. It's a Buddhist approach to finding certainty beyond belief and doubt. That's the subtitle.
I'd like to just say one thing. It's a wonderful book. And I was so happy when I asked Elizabeth, I asked you what you wanted to talk about. You said you haven't spoken about this book for a long time and the subject matter. And I was really pleased that we could discuss that today. So,
thank you. So, because I feel the same way. I feel this is a very juicy topic, and it's a topic that a lot of people feel uncomfortable about. And I actually wrote the book because there's aspects of it that I also felt uncomfortable about. And I needed to look, I always think, and this is really important in the Dharma or just in life in general, maybe, when something makes you feel a little uncomfortable, there's something in it for you to learn from. Mm-hmm. And something very basic about faith and the human condition. And I needed to figure that out. Or I'm still, it's like it's a never ending inquiry for me. So I've been feeling lately like I need to revisit it personally. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come here and discuss it with us. I think when I was talking to some of the young people who study with me a little bit about this, that I was going to talk to you about this, they all kind of went, like got tight. And because each of them in different ways said, I always just never feel like I have, you read, you're supposed to have faith. I don't feel like I know if I have faith. And they're all relating to it as a binary, as something you have or you don't have. Is that how you think we should be looking at it?
No, I don't. I don't. I think faith is very intrinsic. We can't live outside of faith because we live in a world that is conditioned, in which everything leans, Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen next due to the nature of interdependence. Mm-hmm. So, I always loved when I was starting this book, I looked up faith in a lot of different books. I wanted to see what other teachers said, the great teachers said about it. And I looked in Tinley Norbu Rinpoche's book, Magic Dance, and he said something which was one of the most profound things and very helpful for me. He said, cows have faith in grass. And I thought, wow, you can't remove yourself from the human condition. We rely on the world in which we live, and there's no way around it. We have to have faith. So whether, it's maybe we're defining faith in various ways. I think when we begin to look at a word, especially when we feel uncomfortable with it, the first thing I ever do is look up the etymology and definitions of the word. So, I had the same experience as you did. I wanted to talk about faith. I wanted to bring this topic out and discuss it in my teachings. Like I want to always, when I go out and so-called teach or have these inquiries with people, I always bring up something that I'm also interested in, want to learn more about. And I noticed so much resistance, just like what you just said. And so it made me want to do it more. And that's why I called it the F word, because I felt like if you say something provocative, and it is a provocative topic, people will be more interested because they know there's some openness in exploring it. And so the first thing I did was I just looked up the different definitions in the dictionary, and I came up, I saw dogma and fundamentalism and doctrine and indoctrination, but I also found confidence, trust, conviction. Like those are two really opposing sets of definitions. But I thought, well, what do these all have in common? I thought, well, they all reflect a desire to find ease in a world that we can't secure. That's a human issue. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting to want to live around this notion of faith. We can't. So doesn't that make you curious?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask you this. How do you see, because faith is talked about almost from the very beginning in Tibetan Buddhist teachings, certainly Nyingma teachings. What do you see? What is the role of faith as a practitioner, and how should I be thinking about faith?
Yeah.
And how should I be playing with faith, maybe is a better question.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes for me, as it is for probably many people, and this is maybe why the young people talked about that it felt uncomfortable for them in some way, feels like you're supposed to believe something. And, sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but sometimes I see people who are like hardcore Christian fundamentalists or something, or Buddhist fundamentalists, which actually I think if you're there's no such thing as a Buddhist fundamentalist, because I think the whole purpose of Buddhism is actually to inquire and be open. And like, as the Buddha said, don't accept things because I say them, but examine them like a goldsmith examines gold. That's such a famous teaching of the Buddha. But so I think there's this, sometimes in the languaging, it says like, you should have faith, or if you don't have faith, this is really difficult for people. And maybe it's cultural, and maybe it's the old way, or maybe it's for lay people, the way some lay people taught their children, but it doesn't have that quality of inquiry, which is why I think for us, it's so important to engage the Dharma with this open curiosity, that, with an attitude or kind of the spirit of being interested, which is actually described as the first, in the words of my perfect teacher, they say there's like vivid or inspired faith. That means you're curious about something, that you're checking into it, and that you're listening to it openly without kind of shutting down. You're not bringing your own ideas or deciding that you know what it is already, or, you're just being open, which is a very active kind of engagement way of listening, to the teachings. And then you engage it. and see if it's really true. So we talk a lot about the three wisdoms, or the three prajnas, the three ways of engaging and seeing it. So the first is hearing or studying, reading or hearing from a teacher. Mm-hmm. The second is contemplation. It's like you bring it to your life and you begin to kind of, I don't want to say scrutinize, you just begin to open it up, analyze it, and also look at your own experience and see if it's true. And the third is like having a very direct experience through meditation. And this is the way we develop confidence. So there's not a suggestion of accepting it blindly, ever. And the whole point of the Dharma is to cultivate prajna, which is a Sanskrit word, which simply means accurate discernment. How do we accurately discern how things are? And this system is a very sophisticated path of discernment, of discerning. And I feel it's very empowering. Like it gives you agency. It doesn't give someone else agency. It's on you to figure it out. So I don't think you have to abdicate your prajna to anyone. As a matter of fact, I've never read it in any text that you abdicate your discernment, your prajna on this path. And that's what makes it powerful. Like I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama, he wrote a book. It's called Faith Grounded in Reason. Mm. I really like the title, but I also think we often think of reasoning as some kind of intellectual thing divorced from, it's like pontificating or... Yeah. Like it could be something intellectual divorced from our experience. But here in these teachings, we're always asked to look. Don't just buy it. We're asked to look. And then in the Madhyamaka or middleweight teachings of the Mahayana, we really look deeply look at the nature of things, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is why, you can't be lazy and do this. Faith is like, I think I ended up in my book realizing that faith was a verb. It's something you can do. Can you engage life without shutting down around belief or doubt? And this is an uncomfortable place for us sometimes. We want to be right. Doubt also has so much rightness in it sometimes. Yeah. It is or it isn't. That's a binary. Faith means you can bear that you can't actually really know anything in a determinate way, right?
That's right. I think that what we struggle with when we encounter, especially coming from the modern world, Tibetan Buddhist practice, it initially appears so exotic, and we're trying to grab a hold of it in some way, and we want to do it right. That's, I think, we're a little bit worried that there's some daddy or mommy who's watching us and going to scold us if we aren't doing Buddhism right. And I wonder if that somehow plays a role in how we approach faith. I love the fact that you're saying it's a verb. It's more like an activity than something we have or we don't have.
Exactly. I totally agree. And this path is demanding. You can't be lazy and do this. You have to be on fire to be kind of alive with it. And if you're not, I don't know how you would do it. This is a path of inquiry, and inquiry itself keeps your mind open. Like I often talk about open questioning. I think that's like faithing. Actually, I want to also give Sharon Salzberg credit because, after I wrote this book, I actually read her book, Faith, and she calls it faithing. No, I can't remember. I said to faith.
You said faithing.
I said faithing and she said to faith or something. We both kind of arrived at the fact that this is very important, and it has to do with what it means to actually be practicing and not shutting your mind down around belief and doubt, So that was really interesting too. We once taught together on faith, and it was really nice. But anyways, I just, the open question means when you ask an open question, your mind is not shut down or it hasn't reached a conclusion. Like a lot of times we ask questions, but we already feel that we know the answer, or we want to find a definitive answer. But if everything is leading and it all depends, which is the nature of things according to the Buddhist view, we never actually arrive at any conceptual truth,
Mm-hmm.
Cling to. Clinging is the problem in the Dharma. So, like the Nagarjuna is like, you do all this analysis and you arrive at the fact that you can't, the actual view is beyond clinging, So, so when you ask an open question, you're not shutting down around the answers or a conclusion. So the mind is open, but you're very engaged. This is what you might call the mind poised for insight into how things are. This is where the mind is most healthy, most intelligent, most compassionate, most interesting, most interested, and that's, we can all see this for ourselves. Like, when is your mind at its best? And when is your mind at its worst is when it's shut down around an object and you think you know what it is and you've reified it. That's when the mind is not intelligent and all your negative emotions start to surge. We all know both of those states, right? We all know what that feels like. It's not pleasant.
That's a really helpful way to put it, I think. It's that this, so what does it mean to have faith without tightness?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good question, the question we should be asking ourselves. And I think, I guess tightness is the belief and the doubt. And when you're not, and that's the binary, right? Belief and doubt, or is or isn't,
yes.
Eternal nihilism. It's always falling on one side or another. And the place where you're most intelligent is the middle way, beyond those extremes. And this is exactly what we need to find out. What is that? When do we experience it and when do we don't? We have to start looking at our mind and we have to start seeing where we're stuck, and where we have assumptions that we cling to and ideas that we cling to. It's like, oh, you hear the word faith and immediately you have a reified, you don't think, oh, well, actually, what does that mean? It's kind of uncomfortable. What are my assumptions around even that word? Because a lot of this is language. We think words are definitive structures, but words mean different things in different contexts at different times. And they're fluid and changing. And they also, the experience of faith is when we have an experience of faith, it's very powerful. I think you've come in more into the Vajrayana. You come into the Dharma through the Vajrayana, like I did, and more the yogic side of things. And we meet these great teachers and we have this experience. And who could even put words to it? And that's an experience of faith. It's just this open, but also we're recognizing something outside of us and valuing it as a bigger experience. So we're part of that experience. It's not just the teacher there, but it's the interdependence of teacher and student, Yes. But then when we're challenged, we kind of shut down around faith. And we have different experiences of what faith is. Have we looked and asked ourselves, what are those? Have we even looked at our own experience around faith? But we just have a tendency to shut down around a word because there's something in our culture that makes us feel like we should, or, then we miss out.
I think it's just basic condition of being human. We like to
shutting down
things we know and feel confident around what we know and not knowing stuff. It's funny because Buddhism ultimately, and especially when you talk about having a teacher, the teacher's there, he's constantly, or she is constantly trying to introduce you to groundlessness, which is the thing you really don't want to see. You spend countless lifetimes avoiding groundlessness, right? That's something that's really uncomfortable, but it's actually the nature of reality. And so So there's like a conundrum right there from the very beginning, is that we're trying not to go there. And how do we not go there? It's by saying, oh, yes, I know this, or I don't know that, or I doubt this. And that's all just ways to hide from groundlessness.
Exactly. Yeah, I think faith has a lot to do with this notion of groundlessness, except for faith has an aspect of confidence in
Yes.
so-called groundlessness. Of course, ground and groundlessness are two extremes again. They're a binary. You can't have groundlessness without clinging to ground. So
That's
you need to step outside that's the middle way, right? You're
That's-
stepping out of extreme thinking and realizing, because you feel groundless when you're clinging to something and you feel somebody's taking it away from you or something.
true. Yes.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. It's very right to say that, because maybe this is why we steer clear of certain things. But faith is exactly that. It's the ability to not shut down in the face of not knowing, but there's some kind of confidence that comes from that, because it's precarious to cling to something that's not stable. Like,
Yes. It's very beautiful what you're saying, because I understand you to be saying is that faith is actually the way we find, I'm going to just use a word here, okayness in this groundless feeling. We begin to feel that it's safe through faith rather than scary.
right. Yeah, it's just outside that whole system.
Yeah.
That there's other option.
Yeah.
It's called the middle way, or the Churchill, or the Rikpa, or the whatever you want, wherever you are, what path you come from. There's all these names, but to describe it. But it's exactly. It's exactly how you're saying. And the thing is that it's amazing because it's unconditional. Faith. I mean, where we're headed on the path in terms of unconditional. Like, if I could just say an experience I had, a long time ago in retreat, and I was doing, I guess, sadhana practice or something. And I was really going through a rough time, and I felt that I wasn't kind of connecting with the deity in my practice. It was really dark. And it's not like I didn't have faith in the Dharma. It was just the pain of not connecting with something bigger and the longing to want to do it and feeling that wasn't okay. And then, I went through a really dark time. I mean, most people who practice for a while do understand what I'm saying. It was dark, and sometimes I felt more that I was lacking. So meanwhile, oddly, my friend brought me a book on Mother Teresa's letters to a friend when she's going through this like crisis of faith, like this dark night of the soul that she went through. I don't know if you heard about that, but it was interesting to me. So she was saying, God's not showing his face to me. She couldn't interface, so that whatever she was experiencing, she saw as something other than God. So this went on for a while with me, and I was like really connecting with Mother Teresa's problems, so I went to see my teacher, Kongtrul Rinpoche, and I said, the guru's not showing it. I can't see the face of the guru. And he says, all this other stuff is the face of the guru. He's saying it's all of the nature, at the very best, it's of the nature of emptiness and luminosity, but it's also your teacher. Like, you can't find unconditional happiness when you're seeing happiness as opposed to unhappiness. And you have all this preference and all this hope and fear. And when he said that, I was like, oh, yeah. And that, how could Mother Teresa, I have this great faith that she must have come to understand. She was going over that last hump of preferences, and that God is not just this conditional thing that makes you comfortable. Right?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful story, because I don't think I've ever met anybody who's done practice almost in any spiritual tradition that hasn't come up against some version of what you're talking about. It just seems something fundamental to the beast, if you will. This clinging to that last bit of almost like, am I doing it right? Or it's not working. I'm not working. Maybe I'm the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, what brought me to Tuku Origin, I've been practicing somewhat seriously Tibetan Buddhism for 7 years or so, and feeling like, although I intellectually understood something about Buddhist practice, I was a computer programmer, so going through logical reasoning of that kind of stuff wasn't so difficult. But I felt I had no direct experience, and even started to think, well, that's a sign that Buddhism probably isn't for me, because if I'm just not very good at it. And then fortunately I did one last thing. I decided to go to Nepal I wanted to connect with a master who'd come to spiritual maturity before the Cultural Revolution, because I'd had a brief encounter with Dudjom Rinpoche, and then I met, Kensei Rinpoche a few times, and a few others, Kalo Rinpoche, but I didn't really get like the full juice. And so I thought, I just should give it one last go.
Well, he was amazing. So
yeah. Well, at least for me, I realized that, of course, I'm not good at this, because I'm trying to do the one thing that is the hardest thing to do in one sense. In one sense, it's quite easy. I mean, that was Tuku Origins' gift. It's very easy. It's so easy. Just lean back in his chair. It's just so easy. But in another sense, for me, it was it was really where all my stickiness and the most subtle kind of, clinging lived. So yeah, it's still really difficult, but I learned to live with that.
Yeah. And we just work with it, but it's a great lesson. I thought Mother Teresa, it was a great lesson. It's not like, we're waiting around for things to find a perfect state of peaceful equilibrium. The world is not going to let that happen. That's like, even if it's not your suffering, it's going to be other people's suffering. So it's like, how do we get big enough for our life so that we allow life to happen, not according to our preferences? Because what's the difference of being a Dharma practitioner? Like, we take refuge, which has to do with faith, right? We take refuge in the Dharma. What we're not taking refuge from the world of, like, samsara is not some kind of geographical place. Samsara is what happens when we are trying to live. We want the world to happen according to our preferences, and we're full of hope and fear. And then we think, we're going to leave that behind and go into the Dharma. And then we expect the teacher to be a certain way that makes us feel comfortable. We expect to sit down and have like a stream of illuminating experiences. We expect the Sangha to be a certain way. So we take refuge in the three jewels, but actually we just drag the whole view into the Dharma. True, right?
Yes, absolutely. I love how you say it. That's probably why people can't see, but I'm grinning right now.
Yeah, we have to make fun of ourselves because we're so kind of humorous.
Yeah. But I think that's what I'm getting out of what you're saying is that this whole is seeing, of course, yes, I'm still a little bit stuck, but seeing the joy in that and this beautiful way you have it of staying within the power of the open question, the curiosity, that's interesting. Look, I'm a little sticky there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we don't have to look at our experiences and ourself as like so problematic. We have to use it to work it's something to work with, and something to bring onto the path. So
okay, but I want to then ask you a question, because let's get practical here, because some of the people who are listening are probably feeling right now, yeah, okay, this all sounds great, but look, I'm really stuck in this shit right now. What do we do? What do we do? How is a way to approach it? I mean, I think we've all had the experience of intellectually, we know the way we're going about it isn't quite right, but we can't seem to become different than how we are. So what's your advice? And I'm struggling to let go of this idea of faith as a binary, and I want to deal with it joyfully and open curiosity. So what can I do?
Well, I think we have so much aggression to the natural vitality of our own mind. This is a problem. Like things arise and we want to be someone else, somewhere else having a different experience. And yet this is our life.
Yeah.
And I think we don't need to have so much aggression toward it. And I think that's what my teacher was saying. He's saying that was the face of the guru, this thing that you don't want to be there.
Yes.
And so if we brace ourselves against experience, which seems to be the hardest part, like in the meditation practice, like I see up in our retreat land, like I also see that in myself, like you wish you were having a different experience. And then that makes it like it's like you put a lid on that experience. It's like you put a lid on faith. You don't even want to see what it is. You don't give yourself a chance to experience it because you've already reified it and said it's bad. And that's what Rinpoche was saying. It is the face of the guru, this dark stuff. And and at that time in my retreat, that completely shifted everything for me. It completely, because we can't control what arises from the past. This is all karmic, expressions arising, but we do have agency how we relate to it. And that's what all the teachings are about, we do have agency to relate with some kind of openness without shutting down. That's the open question, Don't decide what it is, but be interested and curious about it. Not even intellectually, just allow yourself not to shut down around it. Don't make it a thing, but just allow some relaxation around it. And there's different ways of doing that. I mean, if you're overwhelmed, you can do shamatha practice and just breathe through it, or if you want to kind of change the atmosphere of your mind, you can do the 4 immeasurables. If you want to see what the nature is, you can do analytical meditation, or if you've had transmission, you can do a practice like a Dzogchen. Like we have so many tools of working with it. And I think that's all the Dharma is. It's like, how do you not shut down around it and reify it? Because then you find, like in the sadhana practice, they say there's the 5 wisdoms and the 5 neuroses. The 5 neuroses are the same as the 5 wisdoms, except for we're just shutting down and not seeing what it is. So with a shift of, and this all comes with practice, and study and contemplation and meditation. So we can't just expect it to be there, but we need to work with it, and appreciate it. But I think the spirit of openness or open questioning, is like, how do I poise my mind in my practice to look at experience, Does that make sense at all? I don't know.
Oh, yes. I think it's beautiful what you're saying. I'm very inspired, honestly, listening to you.
That's good.
I just want to hit the stop record button and go onto my cushion and do a little practice.
Well, you can too. Wait, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. No, I think this has been a really important conversation, and it's helped me. I hope it's helping the people who are joining us today, because I think that this really touches on really the core of what practice is all about. And it sounds so funny. We call it the F word, faith, and we're really hitting sort of the real target of within the target in the way that we're talking about it.
Yeah, it's a juicy topic, right, Eric?
Yeah.
It's a really topic. I think a lot of people nowadays, they want to say, let's not use the word faith, let's use the word spirituality. But spirituality can be anything. It could be anything you want it to be, so it can make you feel comfortable all the time. Whereas faith is going to challenge you as a human being, the human condition. It challenges our human condition. How do we live in a world in which there's all this uncertainty, and how do we find a sense of refuge and ease in the world as it is? And there is a way. And but then, we have to engage that. And we have to say that this is our condition. We have to at least recognize.
Thank you so much. This is so beautiful.
So great to talk to you. Yeah. Can I also just invite people to my podcast too?
Of course. I want to, can I say something about it first? Elizabeth has this wonderful podcast. I didn't know about it. When I first asked you if you would join us on the podcast, you said, as a prep, I should listen to yours. And I thought, okay, well, I'll listen to a little bit because she said I should. But I ended up going, and another one, and another one, and another one. And so I want to say, not just that you plug it, but I'd like to plug it a little bit. It's a wonderful, Elizabeth's a wonderful teacher. I was telling her she's one of the Western teachers I actually look up to, that I think when I think about teaching myself, there's a lot of what Elizabeth does that I think, how can I emulate or learn from that? So I hope people will tune into your podcast. Now you can tell them, now that I've embarrassed you, please tell them where they can find it.
Yeah. Well, I have a website called, this is my nonprofit, middlewayinitiative.org.
Yeah.
You can find it on there, but you can find it on, any of the platforms like Apple or whatever, podcast platforms. It's just called Open Question. And I do focus on really on the middle way tradition, Prajnaparamita. And season 3, I did the series. I do series. I do like a year-long things. I did last year on Sacred World and the seeing through the eyes of Prajnaparamita. And this year I'm doing the self, walking the middle way path. We're doing a lot of analytical, looking and not finding, I call it. And then I'm thinking next year to do something maybe on faith, because I'm just like, I'm so riveted. I wrote a whole book, but I'm just not done with it yet.
I hope you're not done with it yet, because I think you have a lot of important things to say about it. And I hope you keep wrestling with it and sharing with us the exploration. It's really helpful.
Okay, this was fun.
For me too. You're welcome to come again. I hope we'll do another one of these in the not too distant future.
Well, this is at Choki Nima Rinpoche's. So of course I would always, I'm honored, if I can be helpful in some of his projects or whatever. Of course I want to. So
well, thank you. We appreciate it. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, we like to invite you to continue the journey into the heart of enlightened mind at gonde.eu.